right. Just waiting for people to join. Ba-da-bum. All right, everyone. I am waiting for everyone to join, and then we will get started. I apologize for the technical difficulties. Facebook was not working today. All right, folks, we're just having a couple more people jump on, and then we will get started. Apologize for the technical difficulties. Facebook was not working. So we're going to take it on over to YouTube. All right. Welcome, welcome. All right, we have more people on. I'm going to go ahead and get started. And let me know if you can see my screen. We made it. Yes, we did. Yes, we did. Can you all see the presentation? Mm, 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 mm. There is a chat, so you feel free to add any comments. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay. All right. Anyone? And here we go. All right. So here we go. Doo, 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 doo. Mhm. Here we go. All right. What about now? The endless loop. All right. Yes, we can all see all of your windows. Beautiful. You can see all my windows because I am over trying to make it so that you can see any windows, which is fine because we're going to be going back and forth between pricing on Excel, where I'm going to show you hands on how to price services. And then we're going to also kind of go back to some information on the Ashley, who is also on this presentation, kind of answer any questions in the chat. I'm just gonna, since we started late, I just kind of want to get through things, and then at the end, we can go through some real examples. If you have any actual questions in regards to pricing on something that you're probably pricing on or based on your niche and industry, I'd be more than happy to help and answer any questions. This webinar really is kind of a step forward. We will get more organized. It is our first time doing it, so I bear with me. But going forward, the goal is to really educate you all and not always have a price tag at the end of it. This is more for your situational awareness. You guys have been amazing members to our group for so long. And we want to give back to this group and make sure that 2025 is really strong for you guys and that you're making money and that you're winning contracts and that you're filled with the information, the correct information that you need so that you and your business can succeed. So, welcome. Thank you so much for attending. And I hope you find value in this course. This course is a pricing workshop for government services. So when I say services, I mean labor. I mean anything that requires a service, not just hardware, but service. So if you're providing a full-time employee, if you're providing IT services, whatever that may look like, this is a service-based pricing. Next week will be products and hardware and manufacturing. This is the beginner's guide to pricing government services competitively and, of course, compliantly. So, the objectives of today. I really want you all to understand the fundamentals of pricing and government contracts, right? I want you to know the key principles, the guidelines. Um, when you're pricing, not only do I want you to know the principles and the guidelines, but I also want you to know who's pricing what in your area so that you're competitive, right? You don't want to overprice and then you don't want to underprice. You want to be able to negotiate your pricing and you want to know what those approaches look like. And I think for all business owners, not just in the government, we all have a really hard time figuring out what our pricing should be. And people hide pricing. It's like the unspoken word. Like people, everyone wants to know how to price, but nobody really wants to discuss how they personally price in fear that someone will find out their pricing and undercut them. Right. So, but the government contracting world is so different. We really do have the capacity to find everyone's pricing, and I'm going to show you how to do that today. So, we're also going to learn about direct and indirect rates. Direct, when I say direct, I mean how much is it going to cost for you to pay your employees? What does that look like by having subcontractors? What is a direct cost? What is an indirect cost? We're going to kind of go over that and what the government deems that, those terms. We're also going to discover tools for market research. We're going to talk about competitive analysis, how you can find that information that makes you relevant and compliant. And that honestly, if you get audited, you can say, well, this is my proof that my pricing is reasonable. So that's one of the things we're going to discuss. We're also going to, I'm going to teach you how to build a basic pricing model. It's very, very easy in nature. Um, it took me years and years to put it together, but it's going to be easy for you because it's already put together. So I'm going to give you a really fun tool that I built for pricing that's going to make your life a little easier. So you don't have to rewrite the wheel. You're more than welcome to have it, and that'll be on the GovConHacks website. So we're also going to talk about any common pricing pitfalls, issues, overlooking, any requirements that you need to pay attention to, FAR requirements. And when I say FAR, I'm talking about the Federal Acquisition Regulations. Those are the regulations that kind of run government contracting and say what you can and can't do. So these are the laws and regulations to abide by. Those are the long list of regulations that you'll see in a solicitation, not just something that we scroll past, but it actually has a meaning. Do play a part in our pricing. All right, so the introduction to pricing. Some of the things that we want to consider when we're pricing is effective pricing drive revenue, right? We want to make sure we're making money. It's really important. We can't always say to ourselves, we want to be the lowest bidder, but we also want to make the highest profit. I feel like that is common in all industries, but in the government, not so much. In the government, it's about fair and reasonable. So it's not the highest profit and it's not the highest margins. But what you're trading in for high profits is you're trading in stability. So what you're getting is a drive of revenue, instability. So over, if I make 30,000 in 1 month, that's great, but then the next month I'm poor and I'm trying to figure out how to get that money again, right? But in the government, you can have a 4-year contract and you have continuous revenue of 30 to 40,000 each month for the next 4 years, which enables you to then focus on the next contract to win, right? So then you can kind of stack. So the whole purpose of effective pricing is not to think so much about that immediate gain, but the long-term strategy. We're going to kind of dive into that a little deeper later in the course. So, competitive positioning. Sometimes you will price your services competitively to attract a new client. So, I'm always willing to go down on my profit margin if I can do business with an agency I've never done business with. Because once I build my worth and I have had those conversations and they have seen the type of work that I perform and that I'm of quality and I am who I say that I am, and they're happy with me, we're in the front line now. If we win that work, we can build additional work. And sales and pricing is pretty much the same thing, honestly. They really do work in tandem. So if I'm thinking of a strategy, I'm thinking that I'm probably going to price this a little cheaper, not enough to bankrupt me, but enough to know that my return in my investment, which is my ROI, will be that I will work on getting additional I will work on getting additional delivery orders in the future of the contract or an additional contract because I'm building a rapport and a relationship with the people right there, with those project managers. So that's some competitive positioning, is when we say that, that's what that looks like. Compliance with regulations. Pricing does have to adhere to relevant, procurement law. So you can't say that, all right, I want to buy this camera and provide it to the government. And the government's like, we want a camera. Well, that camera is going to cost $200. You can't bill the government $1 million for a camera if you only pay 200. That is a crazy markup and it's taxpayer dollars. So there's regulations and best practices that require you to stay within a certain percentage in gross profit margins so that you are what we call, again, fair and reasonable. And you'll see this very often. I say it a lot, and it's because it's really the motto that the government goes by. It has to be simplistic of it all. It has to be trans almost like very well, I'll show you when you see your Excel sheet, but the Excel sheet kind of shows you it has to be very transparent. So you have to be able to see, okay, this is what we paid, this is what our indirect rates, everything has to be reasonable in price. All right. So why pricing matters? It's, of course, a critical component for you and your business. And of course, it's also within the agency's budget and the value of the requirement. So pricing changes based on what the requirement is. It can, if you are selling one FTE, your profit might be $2 an hour that FTE, I want to say FTE is full-time employee, might be $2 for every hour they work, right? Um, versus if you had 100 employees, you're probably making $200 to $300 an hour. So there's a different pricing method. The same with hardware. We won't dive too deep into that, but hardware usually is about a 10 to 20% markup with a little bit of room for variances because we know that pricing of hardware changes rapidly. So that's one thing. There's different methodologies to pricing based on the level of work. So when you are in a certain niche, like real estate agents, you know your percentages, you know how much you're allowed to put into commission. If you're a real estate agent, it's 3%, your broker gets another 3% or 4%. If you're commercial, it's around 8 to 9%. If it's the government, it's somewhere between 20 to 35%. So knowledge is power. You know what you don't know what you don't know, and educating yourself in your own niche, in your own industry, and what those price look like is what matters. That's what will keep you competitive. So another portion to that again is compliance to the FAR and the regulations. We kind of discussed on that, staying within the pricing procedures and practices that are regulated by the law. The competitive advantage in bidding. Um, Sometimes you want to be competitive. You want to win. You will have the ability to request the prior contract. If it is a recompete, if it is a new requirement. If it is a new requirement, there are many times where you can probably look and see what the budget is. It might have been an acquisition at one point and they had an estimated budget already in mind. If it is a recompete, well, you're very lucky because at that point you can do a lot of market research, which happens to be Ashley's favorite thing on GovConHacks. Gives you a ballpark to help you. Knowledge is power, and filling your cup with a ton of it is going to help you make solid strategic decisions. So you want to know, especially if they're going to recompete, if the incumbent, and when I say incumbent, it's the last company that won the contract. You don't know if that company has a great relationship with the client. You don't know if they have a horrible relationship with the client. You don't know if their pricing was strategically put in place so that they can build a relationship with the client. So all you know is the amount. And so you want to stay within that ballpark. And it's only a portion of your win, but it is a good percentage and part of the evaluation criteria. And in many cases, it's the main point. If you're in the state and local environment, your pricing will play a bigger role than your technical. So it really, really just depends. Again, market researching, knowing who your agency, knowing how they buy and what they buy and where they buy, and also knowing how much they pay, how much your competition is charging for services that are similar to your own. And then in the proposal is a way to enhance, um, enhance your pricing, but not only just your price, also enhancing your win themes. Not only is this price, but we also have best value because we also do the following. So there's ways around it. And eventually we're going to have also a proposal course of how you can write things to kind of fair and provide best value and kind of push some win themes so you can kind of see that they work really in tandem with your pricing. So there's ways to kind of to work through that. Ensuring profitability. So you want to make sure you're still profitable, right? I rather say no to an opportunity if I'm not going to be profitable than go after an opportunity that's extremely low. I'll use janitorial services as an example. They're very low profit margins. It's completely filled industry. I think we just submitted a $20,000 janitorial bid, and I want to say about 672 companies bid on it. Um, so your win rate's like 1%, if even that. So the profit margins are also extremely low. If you try to do the middleman strategy, it can be very low because there's not a lot of room. You want to ensure you're profitable. So it's really, really important to try to pick a niche and price in work that you're comfortable with. And profit is also what we like to call risk. Because if you make a mistake, if you miss something, that's the money that comes out. The risk comes out of your profit. Because you still have to pay your direct labor. You still have to pay for the materials. You still have to do the work that you promised you would do. So what's going to go is your profit. So you want to ensure that you see all the costs. You price in everything that you're allowed to within fair and reasonably, and that you give yourself some risk, some wiggle room is the best way to say it, to consider the what ifs. All right. And so to kind of go back into this, I think we really kind of already honed into these factors. We talked about cost analysis, really examining the direct and indirect. When you're reading a solicitation, I want you guys to really kind of pay attention to the details. I always read through a solicitation twice. I read through it once to get an idea of the scope of the work, right? Then the second time, I have this thought process in me is, how am I going to do this? How? And then I say, who is going to do what? Do I need to hire this person? Because let's be real, we're not doing everything on our own. We're hiring people, right? Or we're subcontracting, whatever that looks like. But who is going to do this work? Then it's, how much is it going to cost me? Because once you know the how and the who's, you can come up with the how much. And then once you have the how much, you can put together a very good basis of estimate. You can put together a level of effort. You can put together a work plan. You can put together numbers and start doing data analysis. You can start looking up what that cost looks like when it comes to salaries, when it comes to any materials, any travel, anything like that. Or you can start getting quotes from subcontractors. So just remember that's kind of the way that I look at it. If there's a methodology that helps you, feel free, but you're more than welcome to steal that one as well. Market rates. So your market rates, you want to be close, right? Like I don't want to say that I'm going to hire an administrative assistant for a position to work on a contract, and the average, administrative assistant makes 50,000 a year, but I bid 150,000. I'm essentially outbidding myself. I'm bidding myself out of the race. I can't even win. I could have the best value in the world and that's just too much. So you want to get an understanding of what the government expects, what they see as a market rate. And some of the ways that you can do that is you can do that through usaspending.gov. You can do that through a GSA marketplace, where I like to look at people's GSA rates, because those are rates that they have been approved for and have utilized on prior contracts or prior work invoices. So that had to be proven. So, kind of putting all of that together, I can come up with a pretty decent analysis of how much those individuals should be paid. I also, and I don't know if you're allowed to say this or not, but I've been to a million companies where we all use salary.com and we will put in the title, and we will go ahead and put in the years or the state and the city, and see for ourselves what the average salary is of that labor category. And that's how we start with direct costs. That's how we figure how much their salary should be. So, market research, competitive pricing, right? Again, usaspending.gov, GSA marketplace, salary.com. There are also a multitude of comp analysis. If you're getting to a bigger point where you're like a small to mid-sized company, there are many times that those companies will hire what we call a comp analysis software. And that software will give you the hourly rates. It will do a much more thorough, detailed review of what it should look like. Now, just very quickly, I'm going to refresh my screen. Make sure everyone can see it, just in case. Da, 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 da. The money bags. All right. Da, 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 da. We're gonna. All right, we're back at it. All right. Let me see if make sure you can all see my screens. I appreciate all of you letting me know. I tell you, it's when you want to do things that they tell you all your systems want to stop working. All right. So, market analysis, analyzing the competitor pricing. We kind of talked about that. And of course, aligning your pricing with the client's needs. That's just knowing what their budget is. Sometimes kind of you fix your pricing based on their budget just because you want to be able again to do work with them. Sometimes they'll give you a budget. If they have a budget of 500,000, you're obviously not going to bid 900,000. So it's really aligning your price with their needs and knowing what that looks like. I'm not going to go too far into regulations and compliance, and I will be very honest, it can get very boring very quickly. So we're going to kind of skip this one. All right, let's break down the basic costs. Let's discuss profit, indirect costs, and direct costs. These are the three core components of your pricing. This is how, like, these are the only things the government wants to see, and this is the only thing that I want to see, right? Let's talk about what that is. Let's pull on that thread there. Direct labor, indirect costs. Direct costs are essentially anything Any costs, labor, materials, travel, subcontractors, other direct costs, any expense that can be associated with the project. So if I have to hire an administrative assistant, a technical writer, if I have to buy machines to be able to produce and manufacture, if I need to go ahead and pay for shipping, um, if I need to hire a subcontractor to do a portion of the work, that's all a direct cost to the project. And this also kind of plays a part into accounting because you want to see those costs that are associated with that project. We call it project accounting, or in some ways, cost accounting. And how you see that is you can kind of easily put together a gross profit margin, which is your revenue minus your direct costs. And that is your gross profit. That is your take home after you've paid your employees, after you paid your materials, after you paid your subcontractor. That is your gross profit margin. So to dive deeper into direct costs, direct labor is the cost of personnel that are directly involved in the execution, such as engineers, consultants, technicians. Realistically, they can be hourly rates or they can be W-2 employees, but they are direct labor. Direct travels, any travel that's incurred into the project. So you can do airfare, you can do lodging, you can do meals, you can do ground transportation, you can do mileage, you can do just about everything when it comes to direct travel. And I think people also forget that you can also do meetings. So if you go out to see the client, that mileage, those meetings, you not only are you paying for they're paying for the hours for you to meet with them, but they're also paying for the travel for you to get there, you and your employees. Your direct material. So if there's any delivery services, equipment, or consumables that you have to purchase to perform the work that you were hired to do, that is considered direct material. Direct subcontractors, of course, outsourced professionals or vendors or teaming partners, anyone that you kind of collaborate with to do a part of the services. Um, those are a direct cost. Indirect costs. Okay. So a lot of you try to figure out the indirect costs. And I know we've heard a lot of just put 20% on it or put 10% on it. That only works for so long because you could be essentially losing money if you're guessing. We want to consider the fact that not only are you paying direct costs, as a business, you're going to have other costs. You're going to have other costs in support of the direct costs. So, what do I mean by that? Okay. If we hire, I'm going to go back to the administrative assistant. If we hire an administrative assistant, we also have to be conscientious that she's going to need health care if she's a full-time employee. That's a fringe benefit. That is an indirect cost. You cannot bill the government for her health insurance bill, but you can bill a percentage of it. That's a fringe benefit. Overhead, rent. If you do a contract for customer services and everyone needs to be at one central location to do the work, you have to consider the overhead. There's laptops you have to provide these people. You need, a phone number. You need furniture. You need to pay a rent of that office. You need office supplies, coffee. All of that is overhead. The overhead to run the business. Now, you're not going to bill the client. You're not going to bill, HHS, uh, your coffee bill, but you are going to put that in your overhead rate as a percentage, as a general overall cost. Profit margins. Profit margins, again, it's based on the complexity of the project, and it's based on the risks, and it's based on the client. That changes. So, profit margins for labor, anywhere normally 4 to 8%. That is additional to your overhead, your fringe, your G&A, and your direct. When we say G&A, we're talking about general and administrative. G&A is your expenses to manage the administrative portion of your business. So your management salary, CEOs that are not working directly on the project, but they are managing the company that manages the project, right? Accounting costs, HR costs, legal fees, software costs. These are all G&A costs, business development costs, proposal writers, pricers. All of that is a cost that cannot be billed directly to the government, but a portion can be in your indirect rates. All right, so we talk about developing a pricing model, and we're going to show you what that looks like. But once you've identified what the direct cost, once you've gone ahead and put a basis of estimate together, you know what your labor is going to look like, you know what materials you need, your subcontractor gave you your quote. You also know indirect wise, you know, okay, well, I'm going to need to buy this. This is what my office equipment's going to look like. This is what I'm going to need, you know, on top of that, the softwares I'm going to need SharePoint and Microsoft and Adobe. Once you have all those costs kind of put together, you're going to allocate those costs. Okay, you're going to allocate them and distribute them between roles and responsibilities. You're going to go ahead and say, all right, I need to combine the direct, my indirect, my salaries for my labor categories, and then I need to add my profit margins. And the profit margins, again, are changed based on the complexity of the project and the risk you're willing to take. Because remember, if it's a higher risk, the higher margin of your profit. Services is not usually a really high risk. That's usually easy to do 4 to 8%. If it's hardware, it's a little different. Sometimes I put 20% because hardware changes so drastically in their pricing. Um, so that's the only difference. It really just depends. And then validate against the RFP requirements. Make sure that you have priced everything not only correctly and fairly, but make sure you didn't miss anything. Because there are requirements. For instance, there are many times where you'll read a solicitation and it'll say insurance requirements, or you need to have a bond requirement. Well, that costs money to you, and that's not billable to the government. But sometimes insurance can cost a lot. I had a client that recently had employees working on a live fire range in Fort Knox, and nobody wanted to give that woman insurance because they had a high risk of getting shot on base. So she had to get insurance through the state because the state was like your last chance, but the state is extremely expensive. And she didn't anticipate that she'd be paying $4,000 a month in just workman's comp insurance. That ate into her profit to the point where she was making a negative profit. She wasn't making anything on that contract. So I say that to say, be conscientious. Once you sign that contract, it's really hard to get out of it, and you could lose money just based on not making sure that you understood the requirements and the criteria that was put into that solicitation. Again, common mistakes to avoid: indirect rates, costs, ignoring, underestimating, disqualifications, financial misalignments, not having enough money. You know, the list goes on. So, how do we mitigate that? Let's have a little fun. Let's price something. Dun, 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 dun. Let's price something. You also know that I sing a lot. Fills the silence. All right, folks. I'm going to hide you all a Excel sheet, and it is my pricing. Like it because it'll be your pricing template as soon as it's over. All right, so this is a pricing template that I've used in big corporations, and I've simplified it just a tad bit to make life easier for small businesses. Let's see. Let's make sure everyone can see my Excel sheet. All right. I'm gonna do little check bases because I don't want to go on a ham, go crazy, and then nobody. Ashley, text me and let me know. I know you're listening, girl. All right, so this is the services pricing template. As you can see, I've already kind of put some examples in here, but let's go row by row, and then we'll column by column. So project manager 5. Project manager 5 is just the level of the project manager that sometimes you'll see in as a labor category, right? So descriptions. You're kind of seeing this tab. I created a description section. So usually the government likes to see the project manager, the education that they have, the description of the job that they will be performing. And then many times they'll want to see market research, how you got the salary that justifies for this individual. So if I think to myself, and in most service contracts, I want to price a project manager, because that project manager is going to be the one managing this project. I'm a business owner. I want to manage my business, not this project per se. So project manager 5 has a bachelor's degree, 10 plus years of related experience. This is the job description. I went and did a market analysis. I went on the GSA and I also went on salary.com. And you will see here in salary.com, I can see that the average median for a project manager 5 is about 100. So that's the average median for that. So that's where I get my pricing there to justify it. There are a million other ways people do it. That's the way I do it, because I don't pay for comp analysis. I can also go to the GSA and take a look at what the hourly rate is there and compare apples to apples. But for this particular situation, I just went on salary.gov. It's salary.com. It has a Florida section. You can adjust based on education, who they, report to, all that good stuff. And it makes life much easier. So I put that justification here in case anyone wants to see it, or if I want to review it at a later point in time, or if I get an audit and the government wants to know how I got that pricing. All right, back to labor categories. So labor categories, project manager in Florida. As you can see, I put that pricing in there. So the $159,847. Your direct rate. Your direct rate is how much they cost per. We break it down to an hourly amount. So you can see I have their salary for the year, and 28 is the hours, that workable hours in a year. So 2080 is the actual hours in a whole year, right? And then we have our fringe, we have our overhead, we have our G&A, and then this is the rate for our direct rate and our indirect rates all in one. And then you see I kind of separated our fee so we can get an idea of what our risk looks like. So that's pretty nice. It's at $8.93, so rounded out $9 an hour for every hour that this individual works, is just going for profit. This is going towards overhead. This is going to our general administrative expenses. This is going to our fringe expenses. How do you increase making more profit? If you bid this and it's a firm fixed price and that's it, this is the hourly rate. I went and I bid and I got awarded the work. Lower your fringe costs or your overhead or your G&A. Find cheaper policies, find cheaper plans, negotiate salaries, whatever that looks like. That's how you can strategically make more profit, and kind of keep a little more money for the company to grow, incentivize. That's how a lot of companies do it. So I wouldn't stare at this number and be like, oh, this is the end all be all, because there's always a way to manage your costs. And that's in regards to budgeting and really understanding your cash flow. And that's a whole different other course. So the fully burden loaded billing rate, it's a burden rate is what we also call it. Your burden rate is what you're going to bill the government. So I'm paying this project manager $76.85, but I'm billing the government $120.51. And you're also going to see here that I have it built in ready for you for each year because let's be real, most contracts give you like 4 contract years with an option year, right? Or you'll have like a base with 4 option years or something of that magnitude. So this already gives you that, and it also kind of takes into account inflation. So you have an inflation of 1.5% each year. And I already can hear everyone in my head saying, that's not enough. Totally understand. Trust me. I think the max they allow sometimes is like 3%, but never really more than that. If it really bothers you at 1.5, you can boost it to 2.5. But that really is just how the government works. So you have that kind of built out there, right? I also kind of put in here as well your hours per year. So in actuality, even though there are 2,080 hours, consider the fact that the government does not pay for paid time off is not something the government will pay for. They will also not, that is a fringe benefit. They will not pay for that directly. They will also not pay directly for holiday. That is also a fringe benefit. And sick leave. Most companies don't have sick leave, but for the ones that are big enough and do have sick leave, or for the ones that have service contract employees that are applicable to wage determinations, they will have, 56 hours of sick leave with a max of 112 built up. At this point in time, though, we're just going to assume that it's a regular employee, 8088. So the real amount that you can bill in direct hours, let's assume that you hired these 3 individuals for a whole year to work at a government base, right? You never have to see them. Cool. Easy peasy. You just have to essentially pay them, right? And they get managed by the government. Let's say that. And there's a project manager on site that manages them. That's a lot of service contracts. So that's easy, right? You're only going to be able to bill the government 1912. Mind you, you're still paying that employee for 2080. So you're billing the government 1,912 hours of that employee's billable time. And this is the amount you have to pay them. That's why indirect rates are so important because those additional percentages and hours you have to recoup and really account for because you have to pay those people. And not everybody can be a 1099. There are laws against having a full-time 1099 because the IRS knows that you're not trying to pay taxes. And so there are many times where they'll back tax you if they find out that there's a 1099 working full time and not listed as a W 2 employee. So just be very conscientious of that. Level of effort. So many of times you will see moments where in a solicitation will ask for a work plan. Maybe there's a level of effort that you have to provide. Let's say that it's not a whole year of work I need to provide. What if it's based on the level of effort? What if I have a project that is only 6 months? Let's say it's a 6-month project. Well, I can't bill the government for a whole year of an employee's work. But what I can do is I can kind of put an estimate together of how long the work is going to take for different activities, different tasks, different essentially work plans. So that's what this is. What is the activities that I need to do in order to provide the services that I promised to do? And most of the time, you can write this in the proposal and you can use it to help you in your pricing. So if I know that there's going to be initiation and planning section, right? Like let's assume just, off the top of my head, I know that when I win a contract, I'm going to have a kickoff period. Um, All this is billable. I'm going to have a kickoff with a client. I'm going to start hiring. I need to start doing staffing. We need to start doing planning. This is particularly development and initiation of like systems integration, right? So I'm going to do some system designing and development with my engineers. We have a technical writer who's going to go ahead and write all the O&Ms and put together all the documents that we have to send out. We're going to do testing, all those things. And then I intend to deploy and go live with our software and integrate those softwares. But then I'm also going to do an O&M services, which is on demand services for the next couple of years. So those are priced differently. So I'm going to go based on the actual hours that I think that it's going to take per category. And only you know how many hours it's going to take to perform the work. And please give yourself some wiggle room and understand that there is no definite way that you could possibly know the exact amount of hours that it's going to take you and your employees to do a certain percentage of the work, a certain task. I have worked with large corporations that make like 25 to 100 million a year, and they still struggle with estimating hours. The best way I can say it is that when you're managing your project, track hours. Track who works on what task. Go to that granularity, because what it'll do is it will help you understand where the money's going, where the hours are spent, and you will be better for it when you do your next basis of estimate. You will say, okay, I bid 112 hours for the project manager in the initiation and planning phase, but they actually worked 156 hours. Well, now I'm never going to, assume it's 112 again. I learned now. I'm smarter now. Now I'm going to bill 170. I'm going to put in a little wiggle room. And I know now, based on the past, that this is how long it normally takes. So if you stick within the same industry, it shouldn't vary. The variations of time should not change very often. Your level of effort shouldn't be too crazy or different. It tweaks a little bit based on the requirements, of course, and what the client wants, and of course what they already have versus what they don't have. Those are all things that you can't change. That's why this is not, a fine definite number, or there's no real way to sit here and say this is exactly what you do to get the amount of hours, right? I just assume project manager 112 hours for 6 months. Um and so and you can put this even into more detail to try to figure it out. Some people do it in sprints, which is every 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks we're going to do this. We're going to have a tag up and we're going to switch it and we're going to try to meet these deliverables. Um and have reviews and so on and so forth. So it really just depends on your industry. But essentially, this is how you can put together a level of effort. This is the labor category that we will build a government for each of these individuals. This is the activities they'll be working on. How many FTEs will I need? Will I need one project manager and two senior systems integration engineers? What does that look like? How many hours will it take within the time period? And what does that cost ultimately look like at the end of the work? So at the end of 6 months, I can happily say that I'm going to be able to make 171,000. Um hopefully, right? And so I also put in a direct cost portion here so that you can still compare, because I know this gives me warm and fuzzies. I want to always know how much money I'm making. I don't want to just have this how much it's costing me versus how much I'm billing. If there's any materials, if there's any materials or hardware that I need to purchase that is billable to the government, that's a direct material here. And that literally is just short for bill of materials. You could put part numbers, description, terms. So, sometimes they'll give you net 30, make those negotiations, but we'll talk more about that in our products course. The quantity that you're purchasing, your shipping costs, and then your burden rate. Your burden rate is literally the direct cost times your burden costs. Other direct costs, shipping, subcontractors, whatever that looks like, you can kind of plug that in. As you can see, I usually put a material reserve of 2.5 for variances. Travel. So I have a broken down version of travel here, and you can customize it however you'd like. But all the formulas are already here. So everything in green is where you're going to fill out, and everything that's in white is where it's going to calculate an answer for you, right? So let's say the project manager is going to fly and do a site survey at a location that we're going to provide services for. Let's assume that's the work that's going to be performed. And we're going to go to, I don't know why, New Orleans, because it's on my mind right now. We're going to go to New Orleans, Louisiana. And the flight is $500. And my daily lodging cost, let's say I got a hotel for $140 a night. My per diem costs, that's how much that I can charge the government for food and for, really, honestly, just food. You can look that up here at the Defense Travel DOD. And this is the authorized per diem and travel rates website. And I will show you that in a few, but I don't want to risk not sharing my screen. So we'll do that later. This though if you put in New Orleans and you put in the dates of your travel, it will tell you what your per diem, allotted per diem is that you can bill the government. And the same for your employees. But let's assume 75 because that's usually what it is. All right. Normally your first day of travel and your last day of travel is half a day because you leave in the morning or you leave at night. You know what I mean? You're not there the whole day. So those are usually paid at 75% of the rate. I rented a car. So the car was $325. I'm just making up numbers at this point. Oh, well, I rented an SUV. There you go. Versus an economy because I'm bougie. My fuel cost for the week is, let's say, $30. On today's economy, let's say $50. Daily airport parking, we'll say $9, right? All right. How many days am I going to go on this survey? I'm going to say 3 days. All right. And then how many FTEs are going to go? We're just going to send one person. Here we go. And then the install days of that. This is my cost for the site survey. The install day. I want to go out there 7 again. So let's say 6 for the airfare. We got that. See how it's already coming up with all the costs. It's pulling from there. So now I know what my direct cost is, my total direct cost, and my G&A, based on what I have it here as, is 10%. My profit I already have as 8%. So this is my direct costs for travel, and this is what I'm going to bill the government. You cannot bill overhead to the government, but you can bill G&A and profit because overhead is a facility and you don't need a facility to travel. But you can do G&A and you can do profit and you can do direct labor and you can do direct costs. Your direct travel costs. So I'm charging them airfare. I'm charging them for my daily lodging. And this is doing kind of the math for me. So this is the daily lodging based on how many nights I'm going to be out there. It already does the math for you. And you can put how many people are going. I will go ahead and put a little bit of like notes in here and comments to kind of guide you if you have any questions, because I know this can be a little hard to navigate, and you're more than welcome to address it and change it for your industry. This specifically was because we used to go and do site surveys and then do installations. Um, but you can change it to just, one simple thing where we travel, how many people, how many days, and it automatically does that as well. And if you need a custom one, I'm always happy to provide it in, because then I just keep it in my arsenal of templates, honestly. Um, so again, feel free to reach out if you need like a custom one for your industry, because that would be fun to put together. So this is the direct travel one. And here we have the burden rate screen. So your indirect rate screen. Your indirect rate screen is, again, the percentages that you want to put in for your indirect rates. It's your fringe, your overhead, your G&A, and your fee. I put a little kind of like a little, I want to say, reference guide here for you. So to resell, what many of you would call middleman approach, because it's definitely not a value added reseller cost. But for a resell service, normally 10%, 1.10, because you don't have a lot of costs. You're purchasing an item from another subcontractor or vendor or manufacturer, and you're reselling it. So there's not a lot of cost to you on this. There might be tax, there might be shipping, there might be something of that magnitude, but even shipping can be direct. So there's not a lot. This is more your profit, to be perfectly honest. Hardware and materials, again, we will talk more about that in our next session, but normally our wrap rate is a 1.2. And when you're kind of putting your wrap rate together, it's just pulling from all your rates. That's all it is. And then it's giving you just a solid decimal to go by. Industry rates, what makes you more competitive is to lower your wrap rate, but you don't want to be too low. Like 1.5 is good. I would say 1.3 is even better in services. In services, 1.3 is great, all the way up to 1.5. Anything more than that, you're in risky territory to not be competitive. You want to stay within these two margins in the service industry. Along with that, if you're too low, let's say you have to hire 10 FTEs, but then you bid at a 1.2, the government's going to worry. If you're too high, they're worried that you're taking too much money. If you're too low, they're worried that you don't understand the requirements and the risk. And they don't want to put you out of business. They're going to be like, okay, I don't know how you're affording that, but that doesn't seem right. Again, fair and reasonable does not always mean the lowest. Labor offsite, government facility. Your government facility is if the employees are working on base. If they're working at, let's say I'm a subcontractor for Booz Allen, and I have, FTEs with them. I have, labor categories that I have hired and I manage, but they're not at my site. I don't have a site. I'm chilling at home. The labor offsite is the employees being at Booz Allen's location. Booz Allen's paying the light bill. They're paying for the office supplies. They're paying for the coffee. I'm not. So my labor offsite rate should be lower than if I had to facilitate these employees and pay for paper and ink and coffee and snacks and the electric bill and all that good stuff, right? Because that's going to require a little more overhead. So for the labor offsite, a 1.3 is a decent amount, 1.35 even. If you want to go higher with the fringe because you want to give them good benefits, that's around, a good margin. The labor on site, that is probably, I would say 1.55, 1.65 is probably the highest I ever want to see you go. If you're just starting, you don't even need it that high. 1.5 is decent, 1.45. And then boom, you're set. Double check system. So there's a double check system here where you can put your overhead, your G&A, your fringe. You can put in your estimated revenue. Well, you can put your estimated revenue here. You can put your estimated revenue, you can put your direct labor, your subcontractor costs, your direct materials, your direct travel, your other direct costs, and you can find out what your gross profit margins are. So based on this, let's do this one here. I'm going to get rid of the OEM services because that's what's messing me up. There you go. Perfect. So if I'm doing a double check, let's say I want to do my direct costs. Remember, we did this all based on actual labor worked. So it's only going to cost me $109,533 to pay my employees. Then the level of effort I'm billing the government for this is $171,763. Right? Let's take out materials completely. There we go. And then let's do, I'm going to round it out. There you go. There you go. So your estimated revenue, your direct labor, your total cost of goods sold. That is the total cost. That is your gross profit, is the $62,232. You put in $109,000, you got back $171,000, you made $62,232, and your profit was 36% of the total revenue. So that is fair and reasonable. Anything over that would, cause for some alarm. Anything under, I would say 25% gross profit in a service contract is worrisome to me, because that might be too low. But I'm comfortable with, when we do pricing, we're always comfortable with a 30 to 35% margin, give or take a percentage, So this is great. And let's assume, this is only, I think we priced for like a 3 to 6 month project. For 3 to 6 months, for not doing anything, because you have labor categories and project managers doing all the work. They have a salary now for those months. Or you can pay 1099, whatever that looks like, for those 3 to 6 months, right? You're just making 62,000 out of that 3 to 6 months. So that's a pretty decent return. And so I am happy to give you all this, and a guide on how to use it, so that you can kind of put it all together and use it for your own pricing efforts. But I think that is literally the end of our services pricing course. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free to let me know. I see that Ashley is putting stuff in the chat. Try $45 low. Yes, thank you, network guy. I will not do my laptop, and I will set up a cable and not Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi has been sucking. 45 for parking at wow. My goodness. Well, yeah, the government pays it, but that's a lot. All right, and just to kind of, because I see we still have people on on the live just for fun. I went to NOLA in 2023. All right, so I think Ashley, if you can just kind of leave in the comments where people can find that Excel sheet link, I will send it over to you shortly. You can upload it in there, and we would be more than happy um, to send you the link, guys. If you want us to email it to you, please feel free to leave your business email on the chat as well. We'll steal it from you, or you can email it to us specifically, and we'd be happy to send it over to you. And along with that, if you have any questions, if you're done for the day and later on you think of something and you have any questions, feel free to, put them in the chat, put them in the YouTube, reach out on our Facebook Live or Facebook group. We're happy to answer whatever you need. And along with that, I would absolutely love additional support in regards to any future courses that you guys would like to see, if there's any questions, if there's anything that you need personally. So if there's like a real estate course or if there's a janitorial course, whatever it is, whatever you're struggling with, let us know, and I'm happy to put a course together for you guys. All right. But I don't see any questions right now. So I'm going to thank you all for attending. May you all relax, enjoy your evening, have some dinner, and I will see you next week. Goodbye.